miss you again and again and again and again. Now everybody asks me why I'm smiling out from ear to ear, but I know nothing's perfect, but it's worth it after fighting through my tears. And finally you put me first, baby, it's you. You're the one I love. You're the one I need. You're the only one I see. Come on, baby, it's you. You're the one that gets your all. You're the one I can always call when I need to make everything stop. Finally, you put my love on top. Oh, baby, you put my love on top, 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 top. You put my love on top. Ooh, come on, baby, you put my love on top, 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 top. My love on top. Baby, it's you. You're the one I love. You're the one I need. You're the only thing I see. Come on, baby, it's you. You're the one that gives your all. You're the one that always calls when I need you, baby. Everything stops. Finally, you put my love on top, baby. You're the one that I love, baby. You're all I need. You're the only one I see. Come on, baby, it's you. You're the one that gives your all. You're the one I always call when I need you. Everything stops. Finally, you put my love on top, baby. 'Cause you're the one that I love, baby. You're the one that I need. You're the only one I see. Baby, baby, it's you. You're the one that gives your all. You're the one that always calls when I need you. Everything stops. Finally, you put my love on top, baby. 'Cause you're the one that I love, baby. You're the one that I need. You're the only one I see. Baby, baby, it's you. You're the one that gives your all. You're the one that always calls when I need you.
Yo, I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I wanna really, really, really wanna zig a zig ah.
If you want my future, forget my past.
If you wanna get with me, better make it fast.
Now don't go wasting my precious time. Get your act together, we could be just fine. I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I wanna really, really, really wanna zig a zig ah.
If you wanna be my lover, you gotta get with my friends. Make it last forever. Friendship never ends. If you wanna be my lover, you have got to give. Taking is too easy, but that's the way it is. What you think about that? Now you know how I feel.
Say you could handle my love. Are you for real?
I won't be hasty, I'll give you a try. If you really bug me, then I'll say goodbye. Yo, I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I wanna really, really, really wanna zig a zig ah.
If you wanna be my lover, you gotta get with my friends. Make it last forever. Friendship never ends. If you wanna be my lover, you have got to give. Taking is too easy, but that's the way it is.
So here's a story from A to Z. You wanna get with me, you gotta listen carefully. We got M in the place who likes it in your face. You got G like MC, who likes it on a easy V, who doesn't come for free. She's a real lady. And as for me, how you'll say, slam your body down and whine it all around. Slam your body down and whine it all around.
If you wanna be my lover, you gotta get with my friends. Make it last forever. Friendship never ends. If you wanna be my lover, you have got to give. Taking is too easy, but that's the way it is. If you wanna be my lover,
You gotta
you wanna be my lover.
I suppose I should tell you what this bitch is thinking. You'll find me in the studio and not in the kitchen. I won't be bragging about my cars or talking about my chains. Don't need to shake my ass for you, cause I've got a brain. If I told you about my sex life, you'd call me a slut. When boys be talking about their bitches, no one's making a fuss. There's a glass ceiling to break, there's money to make, and now it's time to speed it up, cause I can't move at this pace. Sometimes it's hard to find the words to say. I'll go ahead and say them anyway. Forget your balls and grow a pair of tits. It's hard, it's hard, it's hard out here for a bitch. It's hard for a bitch, for a bitch. It's hard out here for a bitch. It's hard for a bitch, for a bitch. It's hard out here.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Bitches Get Personal, our annual all-women identifying show in partnership with the Bitchery of History podcast. I'm your host, Sarah. This show will consist of each of our performers telling a true story about their life with the prompt, Bitches Get Stuff Done. Then the hosts of the Bitchery of History podcast will do a live recording of their podcast right here on YouTube, where they talk about women who made history only to be forgotten by it. Then they'll interview a very special guest. I'm so excited. Before we get started with our performances, I wanted to take a moment to thank you all for joining us tonight and to thank you for donating on Eventbrite or Venmo. 25% of our proceeds will be donated to the Downtown Women's Center, an organization here in Los Angeles that provides resources to women experiencing homelessness. And DWC was founded in 1978 and was the first permanent housing exclusively for women in the United States. It is the only health clinic on Skid Row currently for women. We raised money and toiletries for the DWC at last year's Bitches Get Personal show, and with your help, we hope to raise as much money as possible for this amazing cause. If you haven't had a chance to donate yet, you can Venmo us at It's Personal on Stage. We're also doing a giveaway on our Instagram. All you have to do is follow us at It's Personal on Stage and tag a bitch who inspires you in our latest post. Check out the prizes, you don't want to miss them. And if you're interested in buying one of these super cute Bitches Get Personal stickers, you can head to our website, itspersonalonstage.com. Look how cute. Without further ado, let's get started. Our first performer is Marin English. This is her first time performing with us. She's currently quarantined in Westchester, California. Here's her piece, Slowly.
I talk pretty fast. That's something my friends know about me. I speak quickly, and people usually assume I'm from the Midwest because of the way I talk and the fact that I'm like this. I give off a very, do you want to see my shell collection kind of energy. I'm dorky cute, and I like being dorky cute. And the guys who I usually end up liking are dorky cute. To all of the models and bodybuilders out there lining up to win my affection, you terrify me, and you probably don't know enough about the movie Lemonade Mouth. It's just how it is. I also like jokes that are fast, or part of what makes them funny is that they're told or spoken quickly, or they involve a long string of words. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Shit's hilarious. The reason The Big Bang Theory was on for 12 seasons is because they talked too fast to get canceled. The network would come in and be like, hey guys, we don't know if this is working. And Jim Parsons is rocking back and forth in a corner going, antimony, arsenic, aluminum, and sexism. I guess we will come back later. I've gotten better about the pace that I talk over the years. And as much as it is an ongoing joke with friends, I talked fast for most of my life because I felt like I didn't deserve to take up the same amount of time or space as other people. I didn't think what I had to say was as important or deserving of the same amount of air that someone else would use to say the same thing. And a lot of people around me acted in a way that said they agreed with that. I wasn't worth the same amount of thought or attention as everybody else, and that became very clear. So eventually I went from talking fast to avoid being a bother to not talking at all. And then I started watching stand-up comedy, and it was like I had finally found this small doorway into the world that I hadn't been able to find before. And finally, slowly, people started listening to me if I had something funny to say. And that something funny was usually self-deprecating because that's what my audience expected. But I was just so happy that people were listening to me at all that I had unknowingly entered into this social service industry. For everyone else, seats were free at any time, but for me, I had to pay just to get in the door. Do you know how shitty that is when you're 14 and all you want in the entire world is just to have a couple of friends that you can hang out with on weekends, and all the people you know want is for you to repeat that joke you said so they can tell it to their actual friends later? Just because you know someone will always do something for you doesn't mean you have a right to always make them. I do not let people charge me that entry fee anymore. And I don't tell self-deprecating jokes anymore either. Do I laugh at myself? Yeah. I'm a goofball, and I'm clumsy, and I once tried to flirt with a guy by telling him he looked sad and lonely. No questions at this time. But I don't tell jokes that are at my own expense or that put myself down or that don't make me happy. Because I do not exist to please others, and I deserve to take up space whether I am making you laugh or not. If I want you to see my shell collection, I will show you my freaking shell collection. Bridget Mendler's a better singer than she gets credit for. Deal with it. Because making other people laugh just so they'd hear me once in a while wasn't going to help when I was going to kill myself the day of my high school graduation. What helped was realizing that I deserve to take up space in the world no matter how I or anybody else feels about it, and finding people who celebrate me doing so. So if you're 14, physically or spiritually or whatever, telling jokes about how awkward you are to the people who are making you feel awkward just to make themselves feel better, your existence in the world should be guilt-free. And I've enjoyed taking up this space with you.
Sorry, excuse me. Thank you, Marin. Next up, we have Julia Steyer, a seasoned It's Personal performer. She's quarantined in San Antonio, Texas. Here's her piece, Rumpelstiltskin.
Look, I know in the old fairy tale that Rumpelstiltskin is the villain, but I have always tried to be like him. I have always tried to spin straw into gold. And nothing teaches you how to do that or how to make the best of a bad situation, like having to start over. To all my fellow actors, freelancers, and gig workers, I am there with you. This pandemic has left me aimless, jobless, and homeless, at least in the state of California. Back in April, I had 22 hours to pack up my entire apartment, put it all in storage, and get on a plane to Texas, where I have been living with my parents. What started as a 2-week break to visit some family while we foolishly waited for this virus to pass has turned into an extended stay with an undetermined end. It's been almost 5 months of this new normal, and I haven't quite yet figured out how to be okay with it. But this is not the first time the universe has handed me a fistful of straw, forcing me to pack up everything I own and restart. Some of these new beginnings have been by choice. others by circumstance. But I have survived the multiple times, voluntary or otherwise, that my life has been flipped on its head. First big change came when I was 12. I watched movers pack up my life in Chicago, Illinois, and unload it in San Antonio, Texas. It took a couple months to accept the change, but once I realized there was no going back, my little preteen self looked around, learned how to befriend these new and strange Texans, auditioned for the school play, competed in acting competitions, and took the straw that is being the new kid in middle school and turned it into gold. When I was 18, I took 3 suitcases, 2 carry-ons, 1 duffel bag, and my guitar, and moved to Los Angeles, California, where my only support system came from other bewildered 18-year-olds. Freshman year is a lonely time. You don't know anybody, and you're struggling to manage all this newfound freedom. While all I wanted to do was hide in my dorm room, I knew that wasn't going to get me anywhere. So I auditioned for an a cappella group, joined the fencing team, volunteered to run lights for student productions, and with my eye on the prize, started learning how to spin this particular type of straw into gold. When I was 20, I moved so often that my address changed every 4 months as I moved from Colorado to California to England. During that time, my title changed from camp counselor to rifle instructor to actor to student to world traveler. Oh, a lot of gold came out of that year. At 22, I said goodbye to my life as a college student, packed up, and moved out into the real world. I only moved a half an hour away to a different part of Los Angeles, but nobody warns you how hard of a transition that can be. I got shit done by working as a sales associate, theater teacher, journalist, personal assistant, actor, podcaster, theater critic, all at the same time in order to make a buck. Oh, I was spinning that straw so fast that, sometimes I had more gold than I could handle. Finally, in April, as the lease on my home of 2 years ran up, in the middle of a pandemic, no less, I said goodbye to Los Angeles and headed back to San Antonio. The hardest thing about this move is the uncertainty. I fully plan on returning to Los Angeles, but when? Feels like I've lost my footing, my drive, my purpose. I don't know what to do, and it's paralyzing. And I have to admit, there are some days when I feel incapable of doing anything but laying face down in this particular pile of straw.
Thank you, Julia. Next is Ariel Putman, who performed with us for the first time at last year's Bitches Get Personal show. She's quarantined in Los Angeles, California. Here's her piece, Sexy.
A vulnerable thing for me to say would include the words my body and sexy in the same sentence. I guess you can trace it back to when I was really little and my obsession with teddy bears. Not because they were like cute and cuddly, but I had a thing for humping them until my cheeks turned bright red. One day, my mom walks in on one of my sessions where I was grinding this long, white, fluffy, polar bear looking teddy bear. She walks in, I halt. She asks, "What are you doing?" "Playing." She didn't yell or threaten to pinch or send me to the corner. She just took the teddy bear away. And I felt something I have never felt before. I felt shameful. I used to spend a lot of weekends at my uncle's house, and I would always play with a little girl my age next door. Her and I like to rub our bare bellies together and giggle. Why? I don't know. We called it playing doctor. But one day, her mom walked in on us and freaked out and said that we were being very, very, very inappropriate. and I felt dirty. When I was 12, I went to the doctors for bronchitis-like symptoms. The male pediatrician was wearing SpongeBob SquarePants scrubs, and he walked into the room cracking jokes, to which I remember my head was pounding. I was not in the mood. We start the exam. I'm all laid down, and one of the first things he does, without any consent, is lift up my purple and pink pajama bottoms and does a little peekaboo, grasping my underwear with his thumb, so exposing my pubic hair. I dart a look to my mom, and she responds, "Oh." And he just says, "Oh, I'm just making sure everything is normal down there." He then proceeds to press on my abdomen, asking if it hurts, to which I remember saying, like, yeah, it kind of hurts really bad. And now that I think about it, I was coughing a shit ton, so of course it hurt. Anyways, he was very, very concerned and insisted that we proceed with an anal exam. My mom was in so much shock, she almost started laughing. She was so uncomfortable, she had to leave the room. My mom left the room, and a female nurse walked in to hold my hand. And I just remember thinking, like, what is happening? Where's my mom? Why can't I just get medicine to make me feel better? Like, it was awful. Well, shocker, they didn't find anything alarming. I had strep throat and bronchitis. I remember taking a really hot bath that night to help me break my fever. And I just stared at my belly, thinking, why did I say that my stomach hurt? And then I stared at my pubic hair and winced. I felt violated. In high school, I would always read my mom's Cosmopolitans. I mean, I would fixate on images of what a sexy woman should look like and how a sexy woman should act. I mean, I would tear out these pages and tape them on my wall, along with like supermodels in Vogue. I so desperately wanted to become a woman so fast that I lost my virginity at 14. It was too early. But now I'm an adult, so it's okay to have sex, be free, sex positivity. But I can't help but feel like I am still in my younger self's body, feeling shameful, dirty, violated. I sometimes think about that scene in Bridesmaids, where Becca and Rita are on the airplane, and Becca tells Rita about her sweetheart honeymoon at Walt Disney World, and how Kevin can only have sex in bed, under the covers, in the dark, after they showered, separately. And I'll literally lay there laughing, thinking oh my God, is that me? And then, all jokes aside, I'll lay there thinking okay, well, maybe if I had a better body, what if I got waxed? What if I just went to therapy? And then I get real quiet and I start thinking, well, what if there are other people out there laying there, ball in their throat, heavy chest, thinking they're not worthy of the intimacy that they desire. Maybe that happens. Maybe I take responsibility for that inner child that doesn't really feel safe. And I tell her she's safe now. Maybe I invite her on this journey of self-love. Maybe my journey will inspire others to go on theirs. So here I am at the beginning. It's hard, but it's saying my truth has lit a flame in me that has never been lit before. And it kind of feels, dare I even say it, sexy.
Thanks, Ariel. Now we have Giovanna Frediani, who's performing with us for the first time. She's currently quarantined in Oakland, California. Her piece is called Her Creed.
She moves, she slithers. She kisses, he quivers. He wants a bite of her ripe fruit. She takes him into her garden, only to loot. Mother Eve, he was so weak. Take blame for what he wanted to seek. A girl just wanting to be loved, she walked into his church just hoping to be hugged by a warm embrace, no fear, no trace. What she would find was she was out of her mind to trust that vine, for it was just rust from his old sacred lust. He lit this heart on fire. We wanted to feel, conspire. When he took me in, he said it was no sin, that it was all right. And then he set me alight. I burned, I melted, I died, and I felt it. Little did he know, gods never die. So neither did I. Alas, my light, I will swallow you like the flame you are, to burn you away from the inside, leaving nothing but char. Because your rule dies when you swallow your lies and choke on the smoke that you once spoke. Well, that got him on his knees, begging, save me if you please. I let him know. I'm no professional. Baby, this is just a confessional. Then I take a match to my red bottoms. I must. And I watched him burn because they tried to make us Christian girls learn in God we trust. Now, I'm a woman of the world, neither here nor there, don't have a domain or a claim to my name. I watched it die with the rest of his dwindling flame. And as I stepped from the ash, I did not care, for she was nowhere. I turned away from the sin to be faithful to the survival. The time has come that we realize we are his arrival. Together, we rewrite the etches in stone, forever changing what time has sown. We are a new species, a new sex. We are the daughters, the sisters, the motherfuckers. We aren't just some vex. Seduce me. Strip me of what I'm worth. Give me your worst. I want all of your pain. Drag me down to the deep, dark depths of hell where you reign. Lay waste to my intoxicated being, so warm and supple. I know you'll have no trouble. And for that moment, I'll let you think you won. My king, my type of thing. You'll have your fun. That is, until I'm done. You'll never hear me cry. One day you'll try, at which time I'll knock you down to size and I will rise. The devil inside of me is bigger than you'll ever be. And I'll sink my teeth in so deep to give you something to keep. A memory, a scar, a branding from a time I don't want you mending. For my Lord, my love, my light, I am a new breed, a woman of new creed.
Thank you, Giovanna. Next up is Cherie Ramon, a first-time It's Personal performer. She's quarantined in Sacramento, California. Here's her piece, Star.
Thank you. For as long as I can remember, I've had this deep yearning to be a star, specifically a rich and famous actress. I grew up watching I Love Lucy and fantasized constantly about being the star of my own show, making people laugh. When I was 7 or 8, we got our very first desktop computer and printer. So I sat down, I typed up a letter to Lucille Ball. And in my letter, I very prudently requested that she change the time of her show to an earlier hour so that I could watch it on school nights. See, I had the hardest time waking up in the morning, and Lucy was on at 11 p.m., and I had to stay up and watch. I was so proud of myself. I put that letter in an envelope, marched it over to my mom, and asked her to send it off. She took one look at it and said, "You know, Lucille Ball is dead." I was crushed. See, my mom lived in this world that adults like to call reality, which is also the world that my father lived in. And both were very separate from me. She did a really great job of fostering my creativity, just with heavy undertones of that's not how people support themselves. Her reality was she was dealt a really tough hand. Single mother, no help, with her own demons to manage. She wasn't working her passion job. She was working to pay the bills. My dad started coming around a little before I went into high school. And both of my parents were really big on education. Neither of them made it very far in college, so they both believed that that was my way out of the cycles that they live in. So I tucked my fantasies of being a movie star away faster than Lucy and Ethel could shove chocolates in their mouths. Like, really hid it from myself. Lucy was a lie. So was the existence of my dream. I got my AA, my BA, and then halfway through my MA, some friends asked me if I would act in a film project that they were creating. I felt this jolt of excitement through my body that I can feel even now just thinking about it. Hell yes! But I went to one rehearsal and I was hooked. I wasn't a trained actor, but my parents did teach me the importance of education, so I got myself signed up for an acting class. I started with unpaid productions, really anything that I could get into. And then I got into commercials and paid roles in movies. And yes, I am an actress. It feels really good to say that. I've actually even starred in a movie, and it feels weird to say that. But little Cherie is soaking that up right now. I know it. And last year, I started going back and forth between Sacramento and LA for acting classes. And I started submitting myself for work in LA and even got a couple of roles. That felt really good. So 2020 is my year that I'm really going to make it happen. And with the support of my fiance and my friends and my community, I got a job. I packed up and I moved to LA by myself in February. About a month or so after that, COVID happened. My job didn't work out. I was back in Sacramento. And it just felt like my reality was I didn't get anything done. Now, I've mostly got all the crying out of my system, but what is still lingering here is the lesson. What is the fucking lesson? Was it never meant to be? Should I jeopardize everything again and do it all again the next chance I get? Am I giving up on myself if I don't? Or maybe the only lie was believing in my dream. I'm too caught up in the meta of it all to see it clearly. But I do know one thing, is that I am not ready to give up. I am still an actress, and I still feel alive when I am lucky enough to act. Maybe instead of a lie, this is a redirection. I'm not giving up. I honestly don't know where I'll be in a year, but right now I feel more comfort from that than fear.
Thank you, Cherie. Next is Sam Civarella, our It's Personal executive assistant and playwright development series playwright in residence, who's been performing with us for the past year. She's quarantined in Encino, California. Here's her piece, Mamma Mia.
Hi, my name is Sam. Hi, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Sam. I'd love to blame my parents for choices I've made in the past. I spent years building my case against them, my mom especially. She was the PTA president, my Girl Scout leader, and my softball coach, my school art teacher, even our sometimes lunch lady. That woman wore every hat. But the hat I hated most was alcoholic. I started drinking when I was 15. Blackouts were normal. Crying on street corners or in public places were casual Tuesday nights for me, and drinking alone was ritual. If you had tried to tell me I had a problem, I would have laughed at you because I thought I was a fun drunk and nobody could convince me otherwise. Then, on my 26th birthday, I got a phone call from my dad. It was 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, meaning it was 11 p.m. in New Jersey. I immediately knew something was wrong. It was Christmas Eve. Yeah, my birthday's Christmas Eve. And I had a few friends over to celebrate. I excused myself and went into my bedroom, talked to my dad, and he said that my mom was unconscious on the floor with a bottle of tequila half empty next to her and pills missing from her Vicodin bottle. I froze. Curious as to why they hadn't called 911, I started screaming at my dad. And then my mom got on the phone. She wasn't as unconscious as I had been told. It was a very ugly conversation. She slurred and I screamed, both of us saying things we didn't mean. I eventually hung up on her and went back to my friends as if nothing had happened. I remember before the phone call, I had been drinking a hot toddy. When I came back to it, I took a sip and I remember it tasted different. Like suddenly it was dangerous. So on January 3rd, 2017, I quit drinking. Not because I thought I had a problem, but because I never wanted to sound the way my mom did that night on the phone. Well, I honestly didn't think I would make it 30 days. I also didn't anticipate withdrawal. You know, it's just not what you see in the movies. Yeah, I puked and sweat for no reason, but what the movies don't really harp on is the emptiness and the crying. I cried so fucking much, I didn't think I would ever stop. I guess that's what happens when you feel your feelings for the first time in 15 years. Well, as of today, I am 1,297 days sober. And my mom is sober too. Our relationship changed so drastically after that phone call. First, it got really bad. Then I cut her out of my life. And then soon we were able to have safe conversations about like The Bachelor and Dancing with the Stars. Now, 3 years into my sobriety and a few months into hers, we're forming a relationship I literally never thought we could have. I even invited her to come visit me here in LA a few months ago, and we had the most incredible time. No booze required. We even survived getting stuck on the Harry Potter ride at Universal. Yeah, we got stuck when there were Dementors, and we didn't need a drink after. That's sobriety, and that's success. Because if you've ever been on that ride, it's scary. I was able to show her my life in LA, and for the first time ever, I really felt like she could be a part of it. So she blames herself for giving me the drunk gene, but I don't blame her at all. I made myself an alcoholic. I also got sober and stay sober every day. And now I get to watch my mom do the same thing. Just two bitches getting it done. So, do I have the drunk gene? I don't know. I don't know anything about genetics. Do I look like I know about genetics? I do know one thing though. I did get Lisa's legs and her hair and her face and her love of vacuuming and cleaning and her heart. My fucking God, am I grateful for getting her heart. So yeah, I guess I did hit the genetic lottery after all.
Thank you, Sam. Last but certainly not least, we have our It's Personal co-creator and artistic director, Liz Coomer. She's quarantined in Van Nuys, California. Here's her piece, Liz's Day Off.
Sometimes I want a day of Ferris Bueller. A twist and shot where everyone can see me, but it turns out it's the exact advice Ferris gives. Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you can miss it. I have nothing to say. I have no stories to give. I've been sucked dry. I have no exciting news, no funny quips, no college stories, and I begin to wonder, am I interesting or am I boring? I wake up, go to work, come home, eat dinner, work on my theater show, fall asleep, and start the cycle all over again. Have I ever done anything exciting? I went to Scotland once. I used to go sledding down my driveway in Wisconsin. I actively played PlayStation with my family. I read the Harry Potter books once all the way through. And I've been to Disney World in second grade. But currently, in my adult life, I have no stories to give. Maybe it's John Hughes' fault for me thinking I'm supposed to live in a world like this. I was told my teenage years would be crazy, choices would be intense, dating would be intense, breakups would be intense, school would be intense. But I had a fairly average life. Yeah, I was in the school plays. I loved diving into stories. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. to work on my history homework because I realized it was only time I could focus. I was in a hip hop group. I taught the boys at my school dances for the pep rallies. I had boyfriends and breakups, but it wasn't anything like 16 Candles or Pretty in Pink. I didn't take my friend's dad's Ferrari, and drive around Chicago. I didn't stay out past curfew, and I didn't drink until I was old enough to. I wasn't a rebel. Does it have to be hard to be a good story? College was the exact same thing. I was never late to class. In fact, I was 30 minutes early. And if I went out and had drinks, the next day I would get up early to get my work done in a timely manner. I had incredible friends that would drink half Coke, half cherry Slurpees with me while we watched Lost. I didn't call out like Ferris did. I rarely miss work. And if I do call out, I work while I'm calling out. Seriously, am I boring? I pour all my finances into practice rather than getting that pair of jeans I desperately need, or getting a haircut, as you can see by the mullet that is developing. I begin to wonder if I have enough to look back on. Okay, so I am Cameron. I'll own that. Deeply passionate, trying to be the best I can be. My so-called boring life feels boring because I do everything by the book. I don't want to upset people. I'm constantly worried 24/7. And after I share this piece with you, I'll sit for the next 24 hours wondering if I did enough, wondering if people are judging me, and wondering if it was the right choice. I have a friend who is just like Ferris Bueller. Fuck it, is his tagline. He's further along in his career because of his go with the flow attitude, and the stories he shares are endless. That's why I like hanging out with him. Maybe for there to be Ferris Buellers in the world, there needs to be Cameron Fries. So maybe this one time I can be Ferris. Yep, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Life moves pretty fast. Yeah, maybe not. I gotta get some work done and go to bed.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you to all of our amazing performers. I'm now going to hand it over to the hosts of the Bitchery of History podcast, Max and Allison.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hey, we're back.
Oh my gosh. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Thanks so much for sticking with us.
Oh. Maybe you're sideways, but also there we go. Okay. Okay.
Wait. Oh.
No, we're just going. Hello, everybody. Thank you so. We're just gonna jump right into it. Well, thank you so much to It's Personal for that amazing show, and welcome to this episode of the Bitchery of History. For those of you who don't know us, we are a podcast that explores the women who made history, only to be forgotten by it.
In our 4 seasons, we have covered over 200 women. We just covered 2 more, like 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
And we are going to share 2 more tonight.
Before we get started, though, can we give one more round of applause for the amazing cast of It's Personal?
Applause emojis.
So good. As some of you might know, I'm not just the host of the Bitchery of History. I'm also an executive producer of It's Personal. And I really just want to, hair flip. I really just wanted to give a shout out to Liz and Riley for the amazing work that they do every single day. Thank you so much.
Yes. If you want to know more about the It's Personal live shows or their merchandise or their workshops, classes, I'm going to be teaching 2 classes in August. You can find them on Instagram at It's Personal On Stage, or their website is just itspersonalonstage.com.
Yeah. Oh, and finally, we want to point out one more time, just like Sarah did, our special stickers that were made exclusively.
They're so cool.
Holographic. Yes. This was created
so
by
cool.
Lauren Sierzan, who created our logo as well. These are right from our logo.
Woo! You can find those at itspersonalonstage.com in the merchandise section, right?
Yes, in the shop.
and there's only 12 of them left.
I think so. Yeah, we only had 18 made, and I think about 6 of them have been sold. So get them all you can.
Well, shall we dive into some badass ladies?
I think we
You get to
should.
start this time.
Yes.
I am so pumped for this story. Like, I just know the tiniest tidbits, and I'm already like,
oh my God.
On board.
Oh my God. Okay, so we are talking about Luisa Capetillo, who is in Puerto Rican. So I'm going to do my best Spanish here.
Ooh, exciting.
So she was born in Arecibo, Puerto Rico. You know Arecibo if you know that big...
the big telescope?
The big telescope. Yeah. It's huge and it's amazing. And I fell down a flight of stairs 2 years ago coming down from it. But that's a different story. So she's born in Arecibo, Puerto Rico. Her father, this is a kind of funny part. Her father's name was Luis and her mother's name was Luisa. And they named their only daughter Luisa.
My grandparents are Bob and Bobby.
Okay, all right. So maybe not as...
So I mean...
so they were...
It's a thing.
It's a thing. So they were intellectuals. Her dad had come from Spain. Her mom came from Corsica, which of course was part of France. And they were very liberal in their instruction. They actually homeschooled Luisa. They taught her French. They gave her books by authors, romantic authors, not like romance, like romanticism, the highest ideals of humanity. People like Victor Hugo,
right.
Emile Zola, Leo Tolstoy. She quotes at one point, she says she read the anarchist Madeleine Vernet as well. So like starting to already get this, this education going. And her mother actually in particular, Luisa has this great quote. She said, "To you, dear mother of mine, who never tried to control me or make me think traditionally, you allowed me to inquire freely, only reproaching what you thought were exaggerations without forcing me in any way." Shout out to the moms.
I love that.
Oh, so good. We don't actually know too much about her early life for a reason that we'll get to a little bit later in the story. So I thought instead that we would kind of talk about where we are in Puerto Rico at the time, just real briefly, because it sets up her story as well.
Okay.
When she's born, Puerto Rico had been a Spanish colony, had been for almost 400 years since Christopher Columbus set his grubby little feet on it in 1493. A year after he discovered the Americas. And he claimed it for the Kingdom of Spain and renamed it from Boriquen, which was the name that the indigenous Taino people gave it. He named it Puerto Rico, which literally translates to rich port. Actually, he named the island San Juan Bautista, but that's a whole different story. In the time since then, the island had been transformed into a really important post in the Caribbean. It's the largest main island that you get to in the Caribbean before you kind of swoop up into the New World. And it was used as a waypoint into the New World and as kind of a safety net for the New World as well, kind of as an outpost. Needless to say, the Puerto Rico's native population had not fared well. A lot of them died due to the same things that Native Americans died from, infectious diseases. Many of them were actually forced into slavery, forced labor. Slavery actually wasn't abolished in Puerto Rico until 1873. So for our purposes, this party really starts getting going in 1898 with the sinking of the USS Maine and the outbreak of the Spanish-American War. It's a long story. We're not going to go into it. You're welcome, everybody. But needless to say, the war lasts almost 4 months. Puerto Rico is now an American territory and Spain is basically out of the Caribbean. So imagine being a teenager when all of this happens. Luisa is 19 when Puerto Rico becomes an American territory. And then imagine that you've lived through all of this, including there had been many decades of workers' strikes and rebellions before this as well. And imagine that in 1899, the worst hurricane in the history of Puerto Rico hits the island. To this day, the worst hurricane to hit Puerto Rico. Hurricane San Ciriaco kills almost 4,000 people directly.
Oh my God.
Who knows how many people indirectly? I mean, this is it's 1899. It causes over $500 million in damage in today's money. It's about 20 million in 1899 money.
Whoa.
And of course, what did the American government do? Pretty much
Nothing.
nothing. They dragged their feet. They said that the Puerto Ricans were looking for
Wow.
handouts.
Wasn't hard to guess that one.
Yeah. So it's in this atmosphere that Luisa Capetillo gets her first job. She's 20 years old. She gets a job called a lectora, which translates to reader, in a cigar factory. This is a job that had actually been fought for by the unions. When the Spanish left union, they lifted the rule about unionizing. And so unions started forming, and the unions put in this position where it was literally all she did was sit in the lunchroom and read. She'd read newspapers, she'd read books, she'd read anarchist. Turns out
Out loud?
Out loud, yeah, because at this
Like
time,
she was like the paid reading entertainment?
yeah.
Like she was like the Audible of her time?
She was the Audible of her time. Audible. She'd get credits.
First of all, I need this job to come back, and I need it for myself.
I know. I do so well at that. Yeah, at the time, I think I have the number. It was 40% of tobacco workers and 87% of the rest of the agricultural workers in general in Puerto Rico were illiterate at the time. So this was like one of the only ways that they got any reading.
This is amazing that this was also a job, though, to be like, hey, we want these people who can't read to know what's going on in the news. So we're going to pay you to sit here and read them the newspaper.
The bosses did not want them to have this. They actually fought tooth and nail to remove the lectoras.
Okay.
It was a job fought for by the unions to stay in place. So she, in particular, starts working closely with a union called the FLT, the Federación Libre de Trabajadores, which stands for the Free Federation of Workers, which had actually been responsible for organizing a lot of worker strikes in the time. And she starts working for them as an organizer and a journalist. And in 1905, she makes her debut as an orator. She actually starts making speeches at these events. And in 1905, it's a sugarcane strike in which agricultural workers argued for better wages and future hours. Now, I should note, not that it's really important, except that it does come into play a little bit later on. Everyone okay? Okay.
Was that you?
No, it was not. She starts, I don't know, maybe we're haunted. One of the ladies maybe behind me, I don't know. She starts wearing men's clothing. She argues that it's more comfortable, more hygienic, and actually more appropriate for women who are taking roles outside of the home, which makes sense.
I mean, not wrong.
Yeah, exactly. This is not really important, except again, it comes back a little bit later. I should also mention that this is incredibly dangerous work. I would urge anyone watching this to go and Google what it took for you to have a weekend. And what it took for you to have not only a 5-day work week, but also an 8 to 9 hour working day. There were strikes, there was blood spilled, and people died for these rights. So this was really dangerous for her to be putting herself in. And so I'm kind of going to take two different routes here. I'm going to talk about the work, her written works that she went into, and then I'm going to talk about her travels because they kind of happen interspersed. But if I told you this story that way, it would get really boring pretty fast. So let's talk about her works. While she was working as with this union, she ends up writing a series of books and essays. She is perhaps best known for a book called Mi opinión sobre las libertades, derechos y deberes de la mujer, which translates to My Opinion About the Rights, Liberties, and Responsibilities of Women. She writes this in 1911. The work is widely seen as not only the first feminist thesis to come out of Puerto Rico, it is quite possibly the first feminist thesis to come out of all of Latin America.
Wow.
And I wanted to read this quote from it. She says, "So we who preach and desire a fraternal world should not issue insults, nor attempt to dishonor our neighbor, if indeed we are brothers. Otherwise, we will never come to practice fraternity. This does not mean that we should hide the truth. No. Abuse, hypocrisy, meanness, and any kind of farce must be exposed, because for the mere fact that we are brothers, we must make others understand that we know our rights, and that if they trample on those rights, that we have the right to remind them that we are incensed by it.
Wow.
I got chills. She publishes her own newspaper for a little while. It's called La Mujer, which means the woman. A book called Libertarian Essays in 1907, Humanity in the Future, 1910, Influence on Modern Ideas, 1916. What's important to know is that all of these works focus on her guiding principles, and that is a return to nature. She was a vegetarian, free love.
Love.
She ended up having 2 kids, but she never married actually the father of her kids, and actually neither did her parents. So that came right from them.
Oh, wow.
And also, of course, fraternity and the importance of workers' unions, of course. I found this great quote actually from the Library of Congress. There's a whole entry on her in the Library of Congress. And she said, it says that she also believed in the education of women as a basis of a just society, claiming that if women were responsible for raising children, they needed to be equipped with the intellectual tools necessary to form upright citizens.
Yeah.
Right? She believed that it was
Signing that
also
petition.
necessary. Yeah, honestly, change.org, let's go. I wanted to share one more quote because she really was an ardent anarchist. And so I wanted to make sure that I put that across as well. And she said, quote, "When there is no longer the need to steal a roll of bread for lack of food, when private property no longer exists, and we all begin to view each other as brothers and sisters, then and only then will the prisons and useless destructive churches disappear." She was also very anti-religion. "Misery, hate, and prostitution will cease to exist. Free trade will exist because all frontiers and borders will be abolished, and then true liberty will reign on this planet."
All right.
I could get behind that, maybe. So let's talk about what she was doing while she was traveling, while she was doing all of this writing. She traveled as far away as New York. She went to Cuba, Dominican Republic, Miami, Tampa, basically all over. I found this quote from an Indiana newspaper. It was titled "Trouserettes, the Latest in Gotham," and it talked about this scene that happened on Fifth Avenue. And I'm just going to read it word for word because it's kind of amazing. She says, Luisa Capetillo, it says, Luisa Capetillo, should I read this as an old-timey newspaper reporter?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Luisa Capetillo, the young writer and member of a prominent family in Puerto Rico, photographed in the garb in which she appeared on fashionable Fifth Avenue, New York. It consists of a dainty lace and linen coat, full length, full carelessly over striking bloomers, which reach from an inch or two above the ankle to the waist. Miss Capetillo's costume attracted so much attention that the busy avenue was congested with thousands of people and scores of automobiles and other vehicles. And matters became so bad that a policeman requested her to pin down her coat as far as the knees at least, which she did. She almost caused a scene on Fifth Avenue.
Oh my God, I love it.
And then I found this one from a Chicago newspaper. I sent this one to you from the what's happening outside of Chicago section of this newspaper that said, quote, "So far, no women have volunteered services for Army of Luisa Capetillo, Puerto Rican Joan of Arc, who plans to free women from the bondage of skirts."
And my response was, I feel like one of the most feminist things that I do is not wear a bra.
Yeah.
Because why? They're so uncomfortable. I'm not here for it.
More power to you. I think all the power in the world. She goes to, she travels to Florida. She goes to Ybor City, which is part of Tampa. It's like this historic cigar making part of Tampa. She works with Cuban, Italian, African-American, and Spanish cigar workers who had moved there in the 19th century, again, organizing so they know their rights. In Cuba, she's actually arrested in 1915 in Cuba in another strike. She's arrested for on the charge of causing a scandal. And it was because she was wearing pants.
Wait.
It wasn't the strike. She was arrested for wearing pants, for, quote, causing a scandal. She gets to court and she tells the judge, Your Honor, I always wear pants. And she actually lifts up her skirt and she shows that she's wearing pants underneath her skirt. And she says, and on the night in question, instead of wearing them underneath, I wore them just like men do, based on my perfect civil right to do so on the outside. And the judge agreed and dismissed the whole case.
Oh my God, I love it. It makes me think, I think it's like a Shel Silverstein poem or something. That's like where I wear my clothes. I don't know. I can't think of it now.
Maybe a Dr. Seuss in
Maybe.
public, on the street, in a car, at the bar.
Yeah. Sometimes I wear my pants on my head, and sometimes I wear my pants on my legs.
Top, pants on pop. So she returns to Puerto Rico. The sugar strike of 1916 might be maybe the biggest protest that she's known for. More than 40,000 sugar industrial workers on the island of Puerto Rico participated in the strike for 5 months.
Whoa!
And was actually successful in making it one of the largest strikes in Puerto Rican history, and resulted actually in a national salary increase for their labor. The rest of her life pretty much went on in the same fashion. She wrote, organized, spoke out, and was actually arrested many more times than just the one time in Puerto Rico, including once she was on horseback leading a protest. Unfortunately, the rest of her life doesn't actually end up being that long. She dies on October 10th, 1922 from tuberculosis. 18 days before her 43rd birthday.
Whoa.
Her funeral was actually attended by thousands of people. I want to talk briefly about her role in the history of feminism. And one of the reasons why this story is mostly just quotes from various writings that we have about her. While she is undoubtedly the first feminist on record in Puerto Rico, and again, if not in possible all of the Caribbean and all of Latin America, her works are not just feminist, and they were not just about workers' rights, unlike some of the other feminists who are working in this time. Remember, Aletta Jacobs, who I talked about in the last episode, was also a contemporary at the same time. And they're much more well-known. And this is really because her works also deliberately focused on free love, anarchism, socialism, and discounting the idea of the nation state. And when you're putting together the textbook, back in the 1900s, they're not necessarily going to be choosing the feminists who were doing all that other stuff, because it's radical. She was ardently radical. And so after her death, her works actually fell into relative obscurity until the 70s and 80s, when, of course, we have third wave feminism coming in. But Hurricane Hugo in 1989 actually destroyed much of the repository it hit Puerto Rico and destroyed much of her work. So most of what we have has been lost to history. And all we really have to know about her life is the writings from these newspapers and the books that have actually survived that were distributed to other people.
Wow.
So it's a pretty light, reading. I just wanted to finish with one final quote.
Yeah.
From her, of course. She said, "O woman, you will set a great and dignified example by breaking all traditional customs, which are unjust and tyrannical, the symbols of ignorance, in order to establish the realm of freedom, equality, and fraternity, symbols of truth and justice." Luisa Capetillo.
Oh, I love it.
Love it. Love it.
Love it.
Did you know that Puerto Rico's name was changed to being spelled Porto when the Spanish ceded it to America? They changed the name to Puerto Rico, and it wasn't changed back until 1933. Congress changed it back to Puerto-Rico. So I thought it was a misspelling in a lot of the newspaper articles I was finding, but it wasn't. It was correct for the time. Correct.
Interesting. Well, what's also fascinating, because I don't think that you know, well, I guess you do know that the person or the woman I'm covering was Native American,
Mhm.
but just the mentioning of like around this time, well, I guess it wasn't around that time, but of like the Native peoples in Puerto Rico, because we're gonna be talking about Native Americans in Nevada and all the white settlers coming in.
Oh, God.
Get ready. Oh my God. This story has like a great and very recent ending. So get ready.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to be talking about Sarah Winnemucca. She was
Okay.
born somewhere around 1844. There's not really record keeping in the tribe necessarily.
Mhm.
She's born at Humboldt Lake in what is now, of course, Western Nevada. She was the daughter of Winnemucca, a Shoshone who had joined the Paiute through marriage,
Mhm.
and his wife. So she had an older sister named Mary and another sister named Elma. And though later in life, Sarah would say that her father was the chief of the Northern Paiute, we kind of think, well, we don't think, the Paiute really didn't have such centralized leadership, but her father was very influential and was the war chief of a small band of about 150
There's always a
people.
group leader, even if it's not official. There's always a
Yeah.
group leader. Yeah.
But she, as you say, like it'll come back later in the story, she'll kind of style herself as like this Indian princess. But just know, like, her father was very influential, but not necessarily like the chief.
Little embellishment,
Now,
maybe?
a little bit. So during her formative years of growing up, she had already started to hear about and be taught to be afraid of men with white eyes, which meant blue eyes, who looked like owls because of their beards, which I just love that description. And these scary people with white eyes and beards started arriving when she was about 6 years old. And as she grew up, she sort of started to figure out, along with other people, that these white settlers, these white people, were not leaving. So she began really adopting some Anglo-American habits. That's when she took the name Sarah. Obviously, she was not born with that name. And she even learned English and Spanish. Her grandfather, I didn't find anything necessarily that talked about his frame of mind, but he was pretty insistent that his granddaughters go to an English speaking school and sort of learn the ways of these other people. So whether or not he was like cool with it, he was definitely a forward thinking gentleman that was like, it's going to be important for you to know this culture and this language and like have an understanding with them.
It's almost just a tactic for survival.
Yeah, so she, requested, and she and her sister went to a convent school in San Jose, California, but they were only there a few weeks when, of course, parents basically started being like, excuse me, why are there Indians in school with our children? No. So she went back home for a bit, but this really exemplifies kind of the rest of her life in a way. She's going to spend the rest of her life pretty much straddling American and Native cultures and trying to sort of bridge this divide. And that's why I do wish a little bit, and she does have an autobiography that I'm going to try and get and read, because I'm curious if her grandfather or even her father sort of instilled that idea in her of like, these people aren't leaving, we need to make our peace with them and like come to an understanding. Regardless of where the idea came from, that's what she's going to end up doing. So in 1859, there was land set aside near Pyramid Lake, near where she was born, for a reservation. And Winnemucca and her family were expected to just abandon their nomadic lifestyle and become settlers and like live in one place like white people did
because
on
that was
this
the
land.
proper thing to do.
Right. Now, think about this. Hello. Land in Western Nevada, kind of dry, kind of not good for farming, kind of no crops can grow there, kind of no irrigation.
So hot. Oh my God, what a sweat.
Yeah. So basically, of course, to reduce it down, the government was like, here, live here, never leave, and farm from a desert. Good luck.
Get water from a
Ugh.
rock.
Yeah, and they have no training even in farming or farming techniques. Like,
Right.
what?
And it probably went
Government is
against their
not forward
beliefs.
thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Just taking
So,
what the earth
of
can
course,
provide.
yeah, of course, many Paiutes die at Pyramid Lake of starvation because there's no food, there's no way to get food, and they were only given supplies the first year that they were there. The first year. Now, government agents take the rest of the money that was intended for them for the following 22 years.
Are you serious? They had a whole bunch of money set aside and they just went, I guess they don't need those anymore. They're doing fine.
Yeah. Well, money and supplies. I'm not sure what the divide was. Like, I don't think that they had corn that was going to last them 22 years or what have
Right.
you. But
Right.
yeah, the agents were basically like, here's your food for a year and good
Resources.
luck.
Yeah.
And like, we'll just pocket the rest of this. Ugh. So, of course, there's a disastrous winter. Winnemucca was really driven to action, and she started begging military leaders at Nevada's Camp McDermott for help. And wagon loads of supplies were finally sent to the reservation because of her intervention.
That's good. Okay.
And because I'm assuming because she was able to speak English and sort of interface with the military people there, she ends up getting hired as a military interpreter. And her father and their band moved to the military camp. So because she knew English, Spanish, and 3 different Native American dialects, she worked really often as a translator. And that she used that to try and get better treatment for her people, but she's really in a tricky spot of like, I'm trying to interpret everything that you're saying correctly, but I also want to tell my people like, hey, don't listen to the white guys because they're not trustworthy. But I can't like,
right.
So she's just kind of stuck. So she ends up translating for this agent named William V. Reinhardt, who of course is a horrible person because also his name just makes it seem like that.
Was anyone in this time not a horrible person?
I mean, Winnemucca.
That's true. That's true. Well, yeah, no.
She's trying her
best.
So she was just trying to like translate and convey the truth of both sides, and of course it just doesn't work, and Reinhardt bans her. Now in 1878 she worked as a messenger, scout, and interpreter for General O.O. Howard during the Bannock War, which is basically a war between the U.S. military and the Bannock Indians, who are from up not near Nevada, more northern, like into Idaho. I don't know what was the state yet,
like up into the plains.
Yeah, but they're not local necessarily, but they're not like crazy far. It's not like anyway. So
like how far my parents were in college. Far enough to do laundry, but not far enough.
There you go.
Close enough to do laundry.
Is my
far
understanding.
Enough they couldn't just drop in.
Right. So the Bannock War is just a war between the U.S. military and this other group of Native Americans. And here's a quote from her time doing that. Quote, "This was the hardest work I ever did for the government in all my life, having been in the saddle night and day, distance about 223 miles. Yes, I went for the government when the officers could not get an Indian man or white man to go for love or money. I, only an Indian woman, went and saved my father and his people." So this is like Sybil Ludington times a million times Indian Native American people are saying, I'm too scared. I'm not riding a horse that far.
Yeah.
White
with no
military soldiers, like, hello.
Yeah. Brutal.
So, get this though. This trip, this like 223-mile courageous trip that she does, lands her on the front page of the New York Times.
No, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Like just her, or was she with other people?
I don't know.
Oh my gosh, we need to find that in the records.
Yeah, June 1878.
Okay.
However, because of this sort of like growing recognition in white society, we can say it started to her people started not trust her as much because now they're
gosh.
feeling like she's
Yeah.
playing both
Double-edged
sides.
sword.
Right. So the Bannock War ends. It ends very badly for the Paiutes because they were just like innocent bystanders. They didn't really care either way. They're like, we're not involved. We're trying to be Switzerland, but we're not a separate country. So military leaders forced the Paiutes at Camp McDermott to march more than 350 miles in the winter to Yakima Reservation in Washington Territory. So I don't know on a map, like from where Camp McDermott is to where this is. 350 miles though, over probably some rough terrain. So this is really, really hard for Winnemucca. She's basically devastated because she had promised the Paiutes that they would be all right if they followed military orders. Whoop, whoop, whoop. There goes the government not following their word again.
Imagine that. The U.S. government taking something from the Indians that rightfully belongs to them. Oh my God. Surprise.
Yeah. So in Yakima, she worked again as an interpreter, and she argued a lot with the reservation agent. She wrote letters to military and government leaders. And in 1880, she actually ends up accompanying her father and other Paiute leaders to Washington, D.C. to meet with the Secretary of the Interior. And they basically obtain a letter from him that allows the Paiutes to return, but the Yakima agent refused to let them leave. So, like, the Secretary of the Interior is like, here's a letter, let them go. And this old white guy with a stick up his butt is like, no, no, no.
That's just a piece of paper. Well, I'm not going to pay attention to a piece of paper.
So now there are several Paiutes that are accusing Winnemucca of betraying them for money. And she shows them the letter that she has from the Secretary of the Interior and says, quote, I have said everything I could in your behalf. I have suffered everything but death to come here with this paper. I don't know whether it speaks truth or not. You can say what you like about me. You have a right to say I have sold you. It looks so. I have told you many things which are not my own words, but the words of the agents and the soldiers. I have never told you my own words. They were the words of the white people, not mine.
Clap back, Sarah. It's so frustrating that her own standing with her people is being hurt through no fault of her own. It's so frustrating to me right now.
So she continues to fight for reform, which she does face-to-face petitions and letters, but it's really failing to improve conditions for the Paiutes. So she begins lecturing in San Francisco. And this is where she starts to kind of dramatize both her own life and the plight of the Native Americans. This is when she was like, oh, I'm an Indian princess. She told a reporter, quote, I would be the first Indian woman who ever spoke before white people, and they don't know what the Indians have got to stand sometimes, end quote. So I'm curious about this aspect because we are reading words from like whitewashed history. So part of me is like, well, I get that you could say, well, she wasn't really a princess. Her father was just like a war chief. But I don't know that she's making up the plight on the reservation. Like, that seems like it was a pretty shitty scenario for anyone to be in.
I think for most historical records, I mean, we have a lot of history in this. We've done, 200 ladies at this point.
Yeah.
The things that are exaggerated, you can tell when something feels based more in reality, especially when all of the other context clues say that things probably were pretty bad on that reservation.
Right. So she describes the abuses of the reservation agents, particularly Reinhardt, of course, who had fired her. But then Reinhardt, of course, responded by calling her a drunk, a gambler, and a whore, because, of course, that's the best insult for women.
Someone needs to slap this dude.
It doesn't really matter what he says, because Winnemucca still becomes famous. In 1883, two sisters, Elizabeth Palmer Peabody and Mary Peabody Mann, who were very important educators, invite her to lecture in New England. And they also arranged for her book to be published, her autobiography called Life Among the Paiutes. So Winnemucca ends up going to lecture and speak nearly 300 times throughout New England, meeting John Greenleaf Whittier, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, and Senator Henry Dawes, among
Heyo.
many others.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so Reinhardt
Yeah.
can cry himself to sleep.
Yeah. Go
Sarah
lick a
was really
doorknob.
not always, not always just comfortable as her audience would like. Her writings about Americans kind of, criticized and called out their hypocrisy, and she challenged a lot of the popular narratives about pioneers. And she reflected, quote, since the War of 1860, there have been 103 of my people murdered and our reservation taken from us. And yet we, who are called blood-seeking savages, are keeping our promises to the government. Oh, my good dear Christian people, how long are you going to stand by and see us suffer at your hands? My freaking drop!
Early 19th century version of the bless your heart.
Mm-hmm. After the mid 1880s, she abandons lecturing. She's pretty exhausted. She's kind of disillusioned. She's not winning anything really. And she told a newspaper, quote, that she had fought, quote, agents for the general good of her race, but as recent events have shown, they are not disposed to stand by me in the fight. I shall relinquish it, end quote. And she was really, like I said, spent her whole life stuck between these two worlds. And she once said, quote, I would rather be with my people, but not to live with them as they live, end quote. So it also feels like, she's probably traveled by plane and gone to a restaurant not by plane, by train is what I meant to say. Duh. Gone to restaurants in New York. Like, I don't know. And then to go back and have to live on a reservation that the government gives you like crappy land. Like, I get it. Why would you want to be there if you can be in New York City?
Yeah.
If that's the life that you want.
Especially, I feel like if you feel like you might have better chance of affecting your opinion or making change elsewhere.
Totally.
Yeah.
So she turns her focus towards education, and she opens a school for Paiute children, teaching them to read and write in English and providing them training in various skills. But the Dawes Act then mandated that Native children be taught in white-run English-only schools, and so the school was closed. Her autobiography, which we know was published in 1884, is called, the full title is Life Among the Paiutes, Their Wrongs and Claims. Mic drop.
Okay.
And it's considered the first known autobiography written by a Native American woman. Her obituary ran in the New York Times again.
All right.
And what I just found out is there's Statuary Hall in Washington, D.C., and every state is allowed 2 statues. Nevada only had one up until 2015, and they were like, who's going to be the last person? Like, we have one more slot to fill, basically. And they end up deciding to do a statue of Winnebago.
Oh, that's
so
great.
That's,
Is she the only
just
Native
like
American
5 years
there?
ago. That I don't know.
I would imagine so.
I don't know that.
I don't know. Maybe. That's really cool though, that they put her
But
up
that's,
in there.
I mean, it's super cool of Nevada not to be like, I don't know, let's do the guy who founded Las Vegas. I don't know that it was a guy, but I'm heavily into it.
It's very cool of Nevada, seeing as how there's a number of other states who put Confederate generals and leaders in there instead.
Yeah.
Real wolf, right? A real wolf.
So that's Winnie Mucka.
Awesome. Thank
and
you
I just
so
love.
much.
She definitely feels like one of those ladies that needs to be more well known than she is currently.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a great article in the Smithsonian Magazine where I got a lot of my research from.
Oh, fantastic.
Check
I think
it
I will find that front page. They've got to have that front page of the New York Times somewhere, like in their archives or something. And I can find that. Maybe we'll put it on our social media or something.
Ooh, yeah, that'd be so fun.
Okay, you ready for our special guest?
I am ready for our special guest.
So excited. Speaking of politicians, here we go. We're joining today by maybe a girl who became the first drag queen elected to public office in California, and I'm pretty sure in the country, actually, when she won a seat on the Silver Lake neighborhood April of 18. Hi, Maybe. Since then, Maybe has continued to make her voice heard here in Los Angeles. We actually served together on the LA LGBTQ Neighborhood Council Alliance. And Maybe actually ran in the recent primaries here in California and came in a very close third place finish. I believe maybe you missed second place by what, like about 1,100 votes or something like that?
Yeah, 1,114 votes.
Gosh.
Oh,
But who's counting, right? Maybe welcome to the Bitchery of History. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about this annoying shadow right here. My phone is standing up and I've got my little light behind me.
oh, it's
Okay.
totally fine. When I first set up this one, I was majorly distracted by the shadow behind me. I kept telling Max, I'm like, look at it, it's driving me nuts. So you're fine, you're fine.
We can
Thank
call
you.
it
Thank you
shadow
so much
gray.
for having me. I'm super excited to be here. By the way, before we start, I was sitting here just staring down at my desk while I was listening to you.
Yeah.
And Max, I have your business card sitting here on the desk.
Ah!
I didn't even notice. I was like, whose card is this? I was like, oh, Max.
That's just meant to be. That's probably one of the last business cards I gave out before the pandemic.
I bet.
Now I just point it at people and they take a picture of it.
Yes. Well, you can have it back if you want.
No. I've got plenty. I've got more than I need, actually. I thought that we could just start right at the beginning. How did you get started in drag? And then how'd you get into drag and politics in particular?
It's such an interesting, I don't know, in some ways, I feel like it kind of happened organically. I've always had an interest in politics and in, civics and I've always been interested in how we can, all fulfill our civic duties. So I started doing drag, I guess, I started doing drag consistently a little more than 5 years ago. And I started doing shows pretty consistently about July 2015, so about 5 years ago. And I started blending my drag with politics right after the Trump administration came into office, unfortunately, in early 2017. And I started doing a lot of political numbers, and they were often satirical numbers. So I would impersonate a lot of the characters from the Trump administration. So
who were some of your favorites to do?
Melania. I really like doing Melania. I like doing Kellyanne Conway, Betsy DeVos, of course. Those are all fun ones to do. And the reason I started doing it is because, well, kind of the first time I did it, I recreated Kellyanne's iconic inauguration outfit, that crazy red, white, and blue jacket. And that was actually really fun to make because I actually made the outfit and everything. But for the numbers themselves, the performances, my idea was to blend, just sort of different news bits with music and, make it educational, but also entertaining and sort of a caricature. And so, so I kind of started becoming known as a political queen. And then I was like, you know what, why not try to get into, local politics? Mm-hmm. So I had actually wanted to run for the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council the previous cycle, but I missed the application deadline by just a few weeks. So I was like, you know what, this will give me time to really, prepare and make sure this is something I want to do. So last January, I decided to run for the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council. And it was really cool because I ran with a group of people. We kind of ran as a coalition called Silver Lake Progressive. And the kind of ideal situation happened. All 11 of us were elected to the council. And being that there's 21 members on our council, we effectively, created a progressive majority, which was really cool. So we've been able to do a lot of amazing things on our council just in the, little more than a year that I've been on the council. And it's really just been such a great joy. I mean, as you know, it's, oftentimes in a thankless job, and, you put in a lot of work, as a volunteer, so, so yeah.
Can you touch briefly on just what the neighborhood council does, and if the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council kind of focuses on anything in particular, or if you guys as the progressive side have focused on anything in particular?
Yeah, so well, the neighborhood councils, for those of you tuning in that don't know, in LA, there's essentially 3 levels of local government. There's the mayor, and then there's 15 city council districts, and then there's 99 neighborhood council districts. And the neighborhood councils, I believe, are the most important level of government, because it's the most grassroots level of government, and it's really where everybody can be connected and can participate in local government. Somebody described neighborhood councilors in a great way. I forget who said it, but essentially you have 1 foot in activism and 1 foot in the government, which I think is so important. And, you know, so essentially what neighborhood councils do is they act as advisory boards to city council. So whenever city council is, there's pending legislation, we as a neighborhood council can vote to either support or oppose that legislation. So that's one of the things that we do. We also address a lot of local neighborhood concerns, everything from transportation and safety to, our unhoused neighbors to just sort of everything that you can think of that has to do with a neighborhood. So so we meet once a month for our official board meeting, but we also have a lot of committee meetings throughout the month. And it's actually kind of similar to the way that Congress works, is whenever you're meeting in your meetings, you're often voting on legislation that was initially discussed in committees. And then once it goes through committee, it's brought to the neighborhood council. Council votes on it, and if it passes, it passes. If not, well, then it doesn't. So we do all kinds of different things on the neighborhood council here in Silver Lake. For me personally, I am the co-chair of the LGBTQIA Advocates Committee. I'm also the co-chair of the Budget and Finance Committee. I was also just elected treasurer, which I just started on July 1st. Thank you. So that's been interesting and really cool. And, when I started doing this, I never really envisioned myself being the treasurer. It's not really something I've ever been like, oh, yay, like finance, money. But when I thought about it, I'm like, ooh, I really thought about it, and I was thinking that, the role of the treasurer and, having some sort of, influence on the budget and whatnot is really an utilized area where we need more progressive thinkers and leaders. I think that, oftentimes when we think of progressives, we think about a lot of social issues and not necessarily, budget and finance issues. But, when you think about it, there's so many areas where, you can, use a progressive way of thinking in terms of creating a budget, especially with all the talk about the, the people's budget right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Budgets are symbols of our priorities.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your recent race for Congress? Why? I always feel like anytime I ask someone this, I always feel like running for Congress, running for any political office really kind of takes almost an act of insanity in a way. And I mean, truly, like you have to really believe in yourself in a way that it's not normal for people to really believe in themselves to that extent. So can you kind of like, what motivated you to run in a district that's currently represented by Adam Schiff? And then what was that race like for you?
Totally. So, I will absolutely agree that a lot of people thought I was nuts for not only running for Congress, but for running against Adam Schiff, who's, one of the most well-known and one of the most popular Democrats in office right now. And the reason I decided to run was because I noticed that, well, first of all, I think that LA is one of the, it's one of the most, if not the most progressive city, in the whole US. And I think that a lot of, in California in general, a lot of ideas that the rest of the nation eventually picks up on oftentimes begin in California. And so it got me thinking, why do we not have more progressives, representing our city, on the highest level of government? And And that's the thing about Adam Schiff is, I never wanted to run a smear campaign against him. I don't think that he's a terrible person, but I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about him and about his politics. And, I think a lot of people think that he's a progressive just because of his role in the impeachment and with the Mueller reports. He is pro LGBTQIA. But, when it comes to a lot of other issues, he's really not progressive. A lot of people, don't realize, his record when it comes to, war issues. He voted for a lot of wars. He consistently takes money from the defense industry. He consistently takes money from weapons makers. And, when you look at a politician's, list of donors, that really kind of is indicative of who they're serving. And, a lot of people don't realize that he voted to give more than $100 million to ICE last summer. And I think that's really despicable in a district that's more than half Latino, So I decided to run against him because I thought that it was important to have a progressive run. And, I feel like only as of recently are we seeing challengers from the same party, challenging incumbents. And I think AOC really helped to set that standard back in 2018. And so
Bowman as well. This season. Yeah.
So one of the reasons I decided to run was because I didn't think that by me running, the seat would be at risk of changing from blue to red. And also California has the top 2 primary. So the general election is the top 2 vote getters from the primary election, not necessarily, not necessarily one Republican and one Democrat. So there can be 2 Democrats. And so I thought to myself, wouldn't it be just fantastic if the voters had the option of a moderate Democrat and a progressive Democrat? And, that was one of the big reasons that I wanted to run. And we came so close. As you mentioned, we lost.
Did. Yeah.
Just a little more than 1,100 votes, less than 1%. Over 180,000 votes were cast in the election. And, by losing by just that little is like, it's both frustrating, but also really exciting at the same time. When we entered the race, we really had no idea how we were going to perform. And so, not only did we get third, but it was a very, very strong third. Nobody even came close to the numbers that we got. So I thought it was really cool. We got over 22,000 votes. And again, to put that into perspective, AOC, she won her first election with 16,000 votes. So
that's a fantastic.
So that was a really amazing experience. Probably the most incredible.
What was it like actually running as a drag? I mean, what was the reception from constituents, and what was the reception?
So also I should mention, so I'm a drag queen, but I'm also a trans person. And so I was the first drag queen elected to public office in the US. I was really hoping to be the first trans person elected to Congress. That was another big reason I wanted to run, is there's never been a trans person in Congress. And how can we trust that, our issues are being, fairly considered when there's nobody there representing us. So running itself was very interesting. I think at the beginning, a lot of it was trying to convince people that this was a serious run and not like a gag run. You know what I mean? So just sort of getting people to take us seriously was a big first hurdle. But by the end of the campaign, our numbers really showed that was the case. So, but the running itself was really interesting because, I was working, I was working my day job, working my council position, and also doing drag shows at night. And it was actually
busier than me. I said, you sound busier than me.
It's like, it was honestly the busiest time of my life. And but it was actually really cool getting to do drag shows during the campaign, because I got to use every drag show as sort of like a mini rally, if you will. I got to get up there and talk about, my campaign and the issues, and, get out there and vote. And so that was a really cool, awesome advantage that I don't think many candidates get,
Talk about using your resources.
Exactly. So, but it was really amazing. One of the things that I was most nervous about ended up being one of my most favorite parts of the campaign was really just going out and talking to voters and finding out what's important to voters and, you know, what are the issues that you vote for whenever you go out and vote? Because, you know, we all have our own political set of values and, you know, things and ideas that we, you know, vote for. And it's important to remember that every voter has a different, you know, set of things that are important to them. So really just talking to people and finding out what's important to you as a voter. Yeah, just going door to door. You know, I think one of the reasons that we ended up doing so well is because, you know, we really led a very strong grassroots campaign. It was just, you know, our small set of volunteers going door to door, talking to voters, you know, handing out like door hangers and putting up signs. And it was a lot of work. But I mean, as you can imagine, running for Congress, it's a lot of work. But it was really amazing, really, really amazing.
A small act of insanity.
Exactly, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Allison?
Oh, I was just gonna say, you know, you were mentioning that you had volunteers working with you and for you, and heading into November, and with all the protests and stuff this summer, I feel like there's such a surge of people wanting to get more involved than they have been in the past, either with volunteering or letting people know about voting or local politics or whatever. Do you have any advice for those people, organizations that they can look towards, sort of channel that energy, not just into social media posts, but into something that's, you know, really active?
Totally. You know, I think that that kind of reminds me, you know, I feel like one of the things that kind of bothers me about presidential election years is that's totally what the focus is on who's going to be the president when, you know, we're in, you know, all of these other down ballot candidates who are in many ways, you know, collectively more important than who we are electing for president. So, you know, I'm not particularly turned on by the candidate that we have for, you know, for president. But I still plan on, you know, going out and voting and supporting all of these other amazing, you know, down ballot progressives. So I think that what I would recommend is, you know, really looking into and finding out who your local candidates are and how you can support them, because they often need the help more than, you know, Joe Biden needs help right now.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to, you know, maybe making a donation or offering to volunteer. And so, yeah, I would encourage people to look into all of the other candidates aside from just the president. Also, get involved with your neighborhood council. I think that, you know, I'm pretty confident that every neighborhood council in the city would like to see more participation from
100%.
You know, just from stakeholders, from neighbors. And that can be everything from just simply attending meetings to running for neighborhood council or joining a committee. There's so many ways that you can get involved just based off of what you can offer, how much time you have to offer, and you know, you know, how committed you want to be to doing whatever it is that you want to do.
Absolutely. Do you talk about how difficult it's going to be in the presidential year for down ballot races? Neighborhood council elections come up, and they're not even in November. They're in March, April, May. And they're like staggered throughout the next something like that.
I know really have people to come out and vote for our neighborhood elections, and it's so important. You know, I think it's one of those things where a lot of people, you know, don't often turn out for local elections, and that's why, you know, LA paired up, you know, its municipal elections with the federal elections just to try to get more people to, you know, participate in voting. And yeah.
One of my favorite questions. Well, first I want to ask you what's next, what's coming up for you. Do you have any plans that are coming? And then I want to know if there is anyone who inspires you or that you have taken inspiration from throughout your life.
Totally. So we are planning on running another election, or another campaign rather, in 2022. The question is what it's going to be. So I'm pretty sure that we're going to be running again for District 28, but there's also a chance that I've considered other positions that are open, such as CD13. Again, Joe Farrell. I think a lot of people want to see him out of office.
Sure.
My hesitation there, though, is that there's already a number of progressives that have kind of put their names in the hat already. And personally, I really don't want to run against another progressive because I would hate to have the progressive vote split. So we, in all likelihood, are probably going to be running for CA 28 again. And we're going to be making our announcement in early 2021, probably January. We're going to be making our official announcement as to whatever it is.
Fantastic.
Excellent. We'll stay
I look forward
tuned.
to it. Yeah, exactly. I look forward to that.
And then what was your other question?
Who inspires you, or has there been people who have inspired you growing up?
Growing up, I don't know. I could say right now, one of my big political heroes is AOC, and the whole squad, if you will. I love just how brave and courageous they are to take these, bold and progressive stances, at the expense of having a lot of the people they work with, constantly challenging them and telling them they're crazy and nutty for wanting to fight for values like Medicare for all. Universal health care should not be this radical idea. Defunding the police should not be this radical idea. And a lot of progressive values and ideas are presented as radical when they really are not radical at all. So
yeah, they're usually pretty center of the lane when you look at the rest of the world.
Exactly.
Yeah. I had AOC up for the last show. She was where Bob is now. I had her up there. Yeah.
Love it.
People would like to get in touch with you or stay in contact or keep an eye out for your upcoming campaign. Where can they do that?
Yeah, my social media, you can follow me on Instagram, which is at Maybe a Girl, MAEBEAGIRL. Oh my God, I did think about that for a sec. Or on Twitter, maybe_a_girl.
Fantastic.
And also, if anybody is looking to volunteer, we're already going to be, looking for volunteers for our next campaign. It would mean the world to us. And, one of the reasons I'm so excited about starting, in early 2021 is, this year when we enter our next election, I'm so excited because now we don't have to worry about first getting people to take us seriously. It's like we're already in this now. And also we're going to be having about twice as much time to work on the campaign. We kind of entered the campaign or the election a little bit late last year. We announced that it was either June 30th or July 1st. And that was it's kind of about the last time you can really enter and have enough time to do everything that it takes, just in terms of not only like the paperwork, but also just getting your name out there. So yeah.
Fantastic.
Love it. I'll wrap it up with just one more question. I know I've asked about advice election-wise, but do you have advice for people, just general life advice? We always like to ask
my favorite
our
question.
guests,
Yeah.
if you have a piece of wisdom that you want to pass on to others.
Yeah, I think it would just be to be yourself and do things your way. I think that, so many people strive to fit in and try to fit the mold. And when people succeed the most, it's because they're being their most authentic, true selves. And so, yeah, just be yourself in everything that you do and don't be afraid to do that. A lot of people, I was reached out to by a lot of young queer people who were, wrote these really nice messages just sort of thanking me for running, because I had some people reach out who were like, I want to do drag, but I also want to do politics. And I didn't know that I could do both until, you showed me that you can do both. I also had another candidate who also ran for Congress down in San Diego reach out to me, and they were in the process of deciding whether or not they wanted to transition. And they actually ran for Congress pre-transition. And after seeing, me run as an openly trans person, that really inspired them to go through with their transition, and they're going to be running their next congressional campaign, as an out trans woman. So, I think just be yourself and do things your way. And that's where, things will blossom for you and, everybody around you.
Maybe.
Love it.
Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Really
Thank you.
It's this is like
Stay
the funny
safe.
part after doing these like Zoom meetings. It's like, okay, I'm all done up and like all interactive. I'm just gonna like sit here in my living room and like have a glass of wine alone.
Perfect.
Well, thanks again,
Perfect.
everybody.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it, and hope to see you again soon. I'll see you soon, Max, I'm sure.
I'll see you soon. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Love it.
She's so cool.
Love it.
She's
Love
so
it.
cool.
Yeah. Super
Thank you,
cool. Got me
everybody.
fired up.
I know, right? Just makes you want to go. I might have to volunteer for her.
I'm already thinking the same thing.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for the second show of Bitches Get Personal. Thank you to those of you who joined for both shows. I hope there are a few people who did that. Remember, there's another. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. I was gonna say, if you want to hear even more, you can listen to the Bitchery of History and It's Personal, the podcast, on all the podcast platforms. Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, all those things. And yes, we do have another show, August 27th. We've got 2 shows that day as well. If you want to quadruple your bitchiness.
Yes, that show's also 7 days after my birthday, so get your presents ready.
Perfect.
In the meantime, you can find us online on Instagram at the Bitchery of History. And you can find It's Personal, which is what I was about to say, at itspersonalonstage.com and on Instagram at itspersonalonstage. I seem to have forgotten how to speak. I think maybe just blew me off my feet so much.
And last but not least, then I will just go ahead and say a huge thank you to the whole It's Personal team who put all of this together. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz, Riley, Sam, Celestial, Sarah, and Jesse.
And to all of the performers in tonight's show for sharing their stories.
Yeah, thank you so much. Oh, wait, we shouldn't forget to say, don't forget we're raising money for the Downtown Women's Center.
Downtown Women's Shelter, Downtown Women's Center, 25% of everything.
Yes.
That's like a lot of a percent.
It is a lot of a percent, yeah. It's Personal's committed to giving back to our community.
Like 10%. No, 25 full percent.
25%.
You want to do the honors?
Oh, I'd love to.
Until next time.
Bitches get stuff done. Bye.
One in the air, I tried to dance it away. I tried to change it with my hair. I wear my credit card below. Thought a new dress would make it better. I tried to work it away, but that just made me even sadder. I tried to keep myself busy. I ran around in circles, think I make myself